Later on, even though with your breakthrough to become a demigod, the technology of the artificial magic net also had a revolutionary advancement, but nothing has happened in all these years. Rash transitions would instead bring risks. Besides, the power of the mystery lock can help us detect many uninvited outsiders, and the existence of that centaur can make the church less guarded against us, So, Erwin, you tell me. At some unknown point, the old man's voice turned ice-cold. Did you truly do as I asked, as you claim to have done? For every sacrifice brought before the God of the stars, did you meticulously verify with the power of the mystery lock to ensure there were no mistakes? Now, Erwin, tell me, did you follow through? You did not. Despite the sharp words, the old man's expression remained calm and unruffled. Words stifled in his throat, unsure of what had happened. The middle-aged man looked up at his teacher's eyes, but seeing the unperturbed gaze, an ominous feeling rose in his heart. This gaze, he dared not look any longer. Erwin was startled, immediately followed by a flash of silver light from his body. 8 rings sorcery, ignore realm teleportation. With just a breath, this sorcery could allow him to leave here. Even if it were a demigod wizard personally taking action, it wouldn't be possible to destroy the various triggered sorcery items he had accumulated over centuries within a single breath. At the same time, hidden beneath the spatial fluctuations, 9 rings sorcery spirit realm travel had begun its preparation. If the old man chose to seal the space at the first moment, his teleportation would certainly be blocked, but his soul could instantly leap to a preset mental anchor in the second layer of the spirit realm. Although having committed so many significant acts, entering the spirit realm might be a case of escaping one peril only to enter another, Erwin couldn't care about that much now. He understood his teacher, knew exactly who he was. In the past, no matter how serious a mistake he made, as long as he was still of use, the old man would always treat him kindly, at most knocking some sense into him like a strict teacher. But now, things were different. Seeing his teacher's drastic change in attitude, Erwin now only wanted to save his own life. However, standing across from him, the old man remained expressionless. Watching his student's resistance, he silently triggered the old secret technique that had been in place for a long time. A miserable scream as piercing pain immediately spread from the depths of the middle-aged wizard's soul. The half-constructed sorcery structure instantly collapsed, the intense backlash further aggravating the mental turbulence. Witnessing this, the old man slowly moved forward. He ignored the student's painful struggle and began to undo the sorcery defenses on him. His actions were careful, as if he did not intend to destroy their structure. Erwin, my student, today you should remember, in this era, how few wizards can become legendary without being exceptional? Mediocre talent? You think you're an exception? No. The path of a wizard doesn't allow for hastening growth. You've made it this far entirely because you have the talent. And the reason you haven't progressed since becoming the tower master of the clock tower, it's not due to your talent. It's because of me. The struggling movements abruptly halted. Then Erwin's actions became even more intense. But the old man remained unmoved, for he knew that at this moment, if the other party were truly calm and indifferent, that might be the only chance for a comeback. But evidently, he wouldn't give him that chance. Erwin, listen carefully to your teacher. Do you still remember your senior brothers? I guess you must remember, but not so thoroughly. You only recall their achievements but don't remember that you, too, were once brilliant and extraordinary like them. Only I'm different from them. When they apprenticed under me back then, they sought the secrets of witchcraft from me, and the young me generously imparted all my knowledge to them. Until later, when they each ascended to become legendary, and even wielded powers close to mine, eventually drifting away for their own ideals, I gradually came to understand. The truly excellent wizards are independent, and it is impossible for them to willingly submit beneath anyone. So when you came to me, it reminded me of them. Thus, I taught you, letting you unleash your potential. And on the day you ascended to legendary, I made you my most loyal student forever. Whimpering, the words were unfinished, but at this moment, though unable to make a sound, Erwin seemed to understand something. So that's it, the research on the mind, the memory alterations, the stagnation for over 100 years. In the 2000 years, the White Tower had birthed more than 12 legendaries. And even with the teacher's help, if not for his exceptional talent, how could he have succeeded his senior as the Tower Master? After all, his senior was so outstanding. His research on celestial body movements was unparalleled. Wait, senior? Yes. Erwin was somewhat dazed. It seemed he had several seniors, and 2 of them had even aided their teacher in the research on the God of the Stars before him. But for some reason, he had never actually met them, yet was well acquainted with their details. Yes, it seems you've realized. Nodding with a smile, the old man slowly said, "Your earliest seniors had long established their own domains, but the later ones all hosted the celestial experiments for me. So, to prevent any mishaps, before they left me, I had to ensure they met with mishaps first." Quietly narrating, using words to stimulate Erwin's spirit. Quietly narrating, using words to stimulate Erwin's spirit, just like the other did to the God of the Stars not long ago. Of course, it wasn't because the old man had any sense of justice, it was simply because it was very effective. Fortunately, they still trusted me back then. Didn't take much precaution, otherwise, it would have been really difficult. Ah, by the way, haven't you noticed? As someone who hasn't even lived 1,000 years since birth, C3 to 349, Erwin, have you ever thought about how you witnessed the Typhon disaster and how you were involved in my experiment from the beginning? It's very unreasonable, but you remember it anyway. Of course, it's because you were never really involved. The ones who truly participated were your senior brothers. The only pity is that the souls of the 3 legendary wizards before and after only proved that memory alteration and soul fusion indeed have indelible aftereffects. This made me have to give up the idea of transferring myself to another soul body at that time. I had no choice but to treat it as a chain. When I sewed your soul and your senior brothers together, you were forever trapped at that step, unable to overturn until death. A student who knows he cannot progress is the best assistant. If it weren't for that centaur's stupidity and your mistakes, perhaps you might have truly stayed by my side forever. But there's no way, after all. Even the scheming of a wicked person can't compare to the sudden inspiration of a fool. Even now, I don't know what was on his mind. There was a slight complexity on his face. When he spoke to this point, even the old man was a bit speechless. He wasn't pretending. He truly couldn't understand. He, Chiron, was clearly a follower of the goddess of the magic net, but most of his students were descendants of the Olympian gods, eventually becoming so-called heroes. Fortunately, despite this, the church was still willing to give him enough respect and trust. After all, he was a student of Hecate. So when Ache trained Achilles again, the old man did his best to aid in his teaching, just like every time before. With him at the forefront, the church wouldn't pay too much attention to what the wizards were doing because that was something the centaur should look after. However, out of guilt for using forbidden technology, as long as the wizards didn't produce anything as dark as imagined, the centaur would just verbally demand they cease, but in reality wouldn't want to pay any attention to their research. Haha, what laughable kindness. Because they don't want to see death, they eat barbecue while choosing to stay away from the butchers and the kitchen? But I don't care about this, as life was good, until that day when his student was captured by deities. He actually brought the divine artifact of the spirit realm to Olympus to rescue him. Taking a deep breath, even to this day, the old man can only attribute this to Chiron being a good teacher and scholar, but not a good disciple or leader. From that day on, the old man knew that the church probably wouldn't be so lenient with this centaur anymore, and his good days were about to end as well. But at that time, he was evidently unaware of the seriousness of art, because the great war in the mortal realm was imminent, and as long as he could delay for a few years, no one would have any time to deal with him. So after much consideration, the old man decided to play a trick. Publicly build the road while secretly crossing the warehouse. But what I didn't expect was that it would be you who interrupted everything again. Refocusing on his student, there was not a trace of warmth in his eyes. Do you know, when I discovered you had brought a human marked with a deity's imprint into the underground palace and even treated him as a sacrifice, how much I wanted to extract your soul and torment it for 1,000 years? You don't know, just like you don't know that even though this is Silver Moon City, a city personally named by the goddess of the magic net, the church always had other means. Even if I didn't tell them, they wouldn't be unaware that one of the wind gods had been here before. This was the reason I chose to hide it at first. It was to make them focus more on this Olympus god. I didn't interact with him. I let Medea communicate with him, not because of her talent, but because she was a demigod, and he was a living deity. Anyone seeing this would naturally draw conclusions, plus her secret appropriation of public funds, stealing the authority of the clock tower. How much that looked like a traitor preparing for defection, how much like a heretic colluding with a fake god. C3 to 370. But what was the result? Nothing happened. Because of you, everything returned to square one. Back then, he might have been very angry, but now the old man was left with only a sigh. That deity indeed attracted the church's attention, but before he could lead the clues to Medea's head, it eventually fell back onto himself. Perhaps this is fate. It is the protection that the Lord, who has never revealed himself, gives to his believers in the unseen. The old man didn't know, he could only guess. Deity, I didn't lose to the church, just one step away in the face of fate. After all, compared to an old thing like him who has seen the great prophet Noah and witnessed the establishment of Enoch's gate, those latecomers are still too young. Humans are not deities, and wizards are not warriors. The years have granted him not only knowledge but also wisdom, experience, and accumulation. Had it not been for this accident, he wouldn't have needed to act so urgently, racing against Thanatos, but could have calmly faced each premeditated change. But with this accident, he had no choice but to take today's path. Sigh. What's done is done. Nothing goes smoothly without a hitch. He murmured softly, looking at his student with neither joy nor sorrow. Now it's time for the final step. Come, look at me, Erwin. From this moment, you will forget everything that happened today and remember your true identity. Jordan, your senior, my student, the legendary wizard who first studied the god of the stars with me. Unlike Erwin, you are ambitious and incredibly gifted. You are audacious yet meticulous. 1,000 years ago, during Typhon's calamity, you were the first to discover the god of the stars, then dragged your teacher into it, even murdering your junior brother who wanted to report it in the subsequent experiments. In the end, you thought no one could be trusted, not even your teacher. So, you used unknown witchcraft to control me and Erwin, subsequently hiding in the shadows and using your supreme mind magic to manipulate the entire situation. You succeeded. No one suspected anything until today, when you sensed some unease. So you decided to abandon your layout in Silver Moon City and exchange everything for a more valuable prize, Youth Goddess Hebe. Thus, after dealing with everything here, you will choose to venture underground, to that vast world between Earth and the underworld. This is not without reason because long ago, you discovered those special races who call themselves Dark Elves. Although you don't plan to join them, you can hide among them, using their power and the dark and unpredictable underground environment to fend off pursuers. Moreover, the underground world is different from both the mortal realm and underworld. It is a semi-independent world similar to the underworld but covered by Earth. Even if the Divine King wants to personally enter, he would have to face Gaia's interception. This is your plan, a bit risky but precise and perfect. Do you remember now? The voice echoed, and with the elder's narration, the mind patterns planted long ago began to influence Erwin's thoughts through his turbulent spirit. Much about the elder was erased because destruction is always simpler than construction. When everything was completed, the elder slowly stood up. Looking at his former apprentice, he knew there were flaws, but this was the best outcome under the rush. This former student indeed had connections with the Dark Elves, although it was at his behest, but all this left traces. Moreover, beyond these layers of cover, the elder's greatest reliance for escaping was his choice not to be greedy. Yes, not greedy because he never intended to take the youth goddess and the golden cup, captured with great effort. Considering that in most cases, the orchestrator of an event is bound to be the greatest beneficiary. Since the greatest gains had nothing to do with him, he naturally wouldn't be the prime suspect. Although relinquishing his spoils was somewhat regrettable, the elder's mind remained clear. He knew what he wanted and what his core pursuit was. Before today, his core pursuit was life, because he was on the verge of death. But after today, he no longer craved longevity as much. Ascension to deity was his core pursuit now. A youth goddess and a divine artifact certainly aid in ascension, but having studied Astrius for 1,000 years, the elder also knew that for a wizard, these weren't necessary. The path to ascension was certainly more than one, and studying deities and artifacts didn't guarantee success. Conversely, carrying Hebe and the artifact would make enemies everywhere, both below and above. When the risk far outweighs the reward, relinquishment is true wisdom. Let them stay here, becoming the greatest spoils of war for Jordan, the blasphemer against the stars in Silver Moon City's history. As for me, I am merely a dead man. This is the final lesson I give you, Erwin. Though you can no longer hear it, as a wizard, never place your trust and reliance on any being. Whether it is a person, an object, a powerful divine artifact, or the so-called truth that cannot be changed. From today on, there will not be a chief wizard of the White Tower, only a reclusive spellcaster, a founder of some mortal academic school, an astronomer, philosopher, mathematician, and a sage trying to decipher the rules with knowledge, the grand sorceress Aklaus. And until the end of this epic, he will not step onto the stage of the mortal realm again. The elder, no Aklaus, who had long shed his old body, glanced at his former student and then at his own old body, pierced by the destruction demon's sword. He then entrusted the complete third layer of the ritual beneath the ancient city to Erwin and tore open a space gate at the ritual's core. Once the final ritual commenced, all traces left by him in this place would be distorted and covered. No one can perceive his traces. Even beings as divine as the Divine King cannot, and this is a well-verified conclusion. Standing amidst the complete ruins, Aklaus sighed deeply. It's over. Everything is over. The White Tower will be destroyed. I witnessed its inception with my own eyes, and I shall leave with the knowledge of the old White Tower, then witness its collapse firsthand. Do you know wizards of the Third Age? Over the past 1,000 years, we seem to be making continuous progress on the path of witchcraft, but in truth, we have been constrained since long ago. Silver Moon City, the Divine Kingdom, the source of faith. The first witchcraft originated here, offering protection to our frail selves. But wizards, as we became powerful, it in turn became a cage that confined us. Souls, life, years, destiny, these things they deem sacred are merely the reflections of truth scattered across the mortal realm. So, from the day I realized all this, I knew Silver Moon City is not fertile ground for wizards. Any place scrutinized by those high above is not. Tyranny can only bring stability. Only change can bring development. Today's mortal world does not belong to me, neither does the starry sky nor the underworld. Any place where deities can freely exhibit their might does not belong to me. Only the underground, the place wedged between the earth and the underworld. The world sees it as a wilderness, but I see it as honeyed. Crossing the threshold, at this moment, Aklaus could already sense the pursuit marks of space, but it no longer concerned him. Come, let history witness all of this. Right and wrong have never been decisions made by a single generation. Morality and ethics are but microwaves under the tide of times. In millennia to come, later generations might curse me, view me as a merciless butcher, or they might sing praises of my achievements and accomplishments, adorning me with glory and splendor. But that does not matter anymore. For renowned heroes, illustrious generals, or even kings who ruled over gods, they are all the same. Open 1,000 volumes of history books, and they tell one lesson. In this world, only the victorious can be king. In the Queen's palace on Mount Olympus, war in the mortal realm was in full swing, and soon Ares would clash with the church worshipping the ancient gods on the battlefield. Although she could hardly tolerate her useless son, in significant matters like this, Hera still patiently cast her gaze there. Thankfully, aside from her son, her daughter was still very considerate. She labored each year to prepare the bathhouse, allowing the queen to wash away a year's fatigue. The queen was very pleased about this, and she would be even more pleased if only Hebe's divine power and godhood were not so weak. Unfortunately, godhood cannot be changed, though divine power can be boosted through faith. To this end, Hera did not hesitate to issue an edict herself, rarely exercising the divine authority of the queen, commanding that the weak city-states surrounding Nafplion City must reverently worship Hebe, honoring the contributions she made to her mother goddess. After all, as one of the rulers of the divine court, she did not lack that bit of faith. Rather, her daughter needed it more. Still, sitting high on the golden throne, Hera felt a sudden unease whenever she thought of the goddess of youth. Bang, bang. Her heart inexplicably accelerated. Taking a deep breath, the queen did not know where this omen came from. Amidst her speculations, she planned to relay her divine will through her mortal followers to see what Hebe was up to and whether she was in any danger. However, when concentrating, as Hera tried to anchor on a sincere priest through the magic net to convey her divine will, she suddenly found that she could not locate her godhood practitioners for the moment. No, they were still there, but for some reason they had gone to nearby city-states. Frowning slightly, as divine power surged, the queen directly issued her divine will. She wanted these priests to explain to her, but shortly after, the believer's reply left her speechless. In order to allocate the faith of several cities to Hebe, Hera had not placed many godhood practitioners there and did not want other deities to have much presence. But recently, traces of demons and evil creatures had coincidentally appeared one after another around other cities venerating the goddess of youth. Unable to combat, the Church of Youth had no choice but to ask the queen's priests for help in eradication. In the back and forth, the few remaining priests had all left, leaving only a few to guard the temple in Nafplion. But without further sensing, Hera knew they were already dead. This had just happened, yet no god would pay attention to the mortal realm for a few dead priests or thousands of believers. Such things were too common. However, standing up from her throne, intuition told Hera that something was definitely wrong in Nafplion. Just as she was about to investigate, another voice suddenly came from the door. "Your Majesty, the nymphs on duty in your West Sea Garden have returned today. Let them wait." Coldly scolding, a deeper anxiety filled her heart. Standing before the golden throne, Hera grasped the air. At this moment, she began to call upon the authority granted by the divine king. All things seemed to gather in her palm, with heaven, earth, and sea surrounding her. Conferring her divine authority across space, the queen looked towards the small city. Seeing only for a moment, she was struck as if by lightning. "Ah, why is it him?" Boom! In a cry of astonishment, her divine power unconscious dissipated, making the divine palace quiver slightly. Blood tears trickled from the corners of her eyes. If she had gone in person, Hera might have been fine. But she had invoked the queen's authority, seeing more while lacking the strength to bear it. Vaguely, a voice she had heard not long ago echoed in her ears, seemingly ignoring the divine court's protection, even manifesting in the palace. Praise you, Master of billions of demons, source of all fallen realms, devourer of multitudes, blood mother tree. Your most faithful followers are here to worship you, offering divine blood and the bones of 1,000,000 souls. Those who often engage in human sacrifices know that to perform a grand ritual, it requires skills and rules. What kind of offering to present to what kind of deity, what kind of ritual matches which deity, and what kind of existence is willing to accept the sacrifice. Fortunately, unlike chaos from the previous two eras, throughout the third era, many great divine powers have appeared in the mortal realm, and more than one is willing to accept sacrifices, which somewhat broadens the choices for the sacrificers. However, despite this, Jordan also knows very well that no matter how wide his range of choices is, there is only one who doesn't mind who you are, what you want to do, your purpose, or your enemy. As long as you dare to sacrifice, he dares to respond with power, and his power is enough to compete with, or even surpass, any great being. The Red Monarch, the mother of flesh, the blood mother tree that devours all spirits, only he can achieve this. This has become the common consensus among sacrificers as this outer god's figure gradually came into view of both deities and mortals following the rampant chaos caused by Typhon. Of course, although more people now know of the existence of the mother tree, the understanding of him hasn't changed much among the common folk. Some consider him as a being like Tartarus, others think he possesses his own wisdom and reason, while some straightforwardly regard him as a part of an ancient god disguised rather than an entirely independent entity. Different people have different opinions. After all, no one has ever seen the true form of the mother tree sealed by the law, and Jordan is no exception. Fortunately, Jordan does not care about the true identity of this lord of evil creatures, because excluding these differing opinions, one thing is universally acknowledged. That is, the power of the blood mother tree is indeed terrifying, but that is only if used against oneself. But if you use him against your enemies, it can be extremely and exceptionally effective. Boom! 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 The east of the earth around Nafplion City. Just when the heavenly empress on Mount Olympus felt something, the third ritual lit up from the ruins of the city, and the place truly affected was not limited to this city alone. Almost at the same time, several other city-states, which also followed Hebe under the order of the Empress, lit up with a red glow. Fanatics, corrupted believers, entities tainted by the breath of evil creatures, they were almost simultaneously affected by the Nafplion ritual, turning into one pollution source after another. Until this moment, the priests who went to eradicate the evil creatures suddenly realized that these were merely baits. Under the sacrifice of the goddess of youth's bones and blood, the nearby believer city-states were directly devastated. Despite being cautious, there were no sacrificial rituals preset by the wizards under the cities of these nearby city-states. But when the mother tree's power descended into the mortal realm, his very existence was the greatest threat. So when the centaurs in the underground palace finally locked onto the coordinates opposite the space gate, this was the scene he saw when he crossed the portal. On an unnamed hill, an old and broken corpse turned to ash in the flames. In the once bustling city-state, a headless, divine corpse, twisted and deformed in the center of a grand ritual track. Over 1,000,000 scattered bones began to join together under some force, transforming into one fallen evil creature after another. And in the sky on distant clouds, the red light from the ground reflected colors, like magnificent fireworks displays. What happened here? Stunned, unable to conceal the shock in his heart. Looking at all this, Chiron even thought he had left the mortal realm. Terrifyingly filthy breaths rushed towards him. Empty eye sockets of skulls stared at his being, as if questioning his inner self. What had happened here? What had those wizards done here? He instinctively took a step back, but a hand firmly held him in place. The expression on his face almost impossible to maintain. The young archbishop stepped out of the pale silver light door behind him. The blood and flames reflected in his eyes, as if telling him the destruction and disaster here. This is not Silver Moon City, and these people are not the Lord's followers, but they have lost their way, and should not be sacrificed to evil demons. Taking a deep breath, the young man felt a bit regretful. In the past, neither he nor the church or other godhood practitioners ever respected this student of the goddess of the magic net enough, even though he had taught many students who did not believe in the Lord. But until the Great War erupted on Mount Olympus, they suddenly realized that perhaps they had always overestimated this reputable sage. Yes, Chiron might indeed be knowledgeable, but in the past few thousand years, he had never achieved anything unimaginable. He had indeed taught many powerful students, but they didn't even learn witchcraft from the goddess of the magic net. He was like Prometheus before being punished in the sea eye. Despite the great fame the world had given him, the essence beneath did not match the reputation. Perhaps the goddess of the magic net had also seen this point, so she rarely visited her apprentice for thousands of years. Chiron, you have indeed taught me an unforgettable lesson. Taking a deep breath, the archbishop stepped forward and then raised the scepter in his hand. Never grant anyone special privileges because of their identity, unless it is granted by the Lord himself. Sacred power surged, and the scepter pointed forward. Before exerting his true methods, he had to first test the strength of these evil creatures. Only by annihilating them here could he continue to hunt down the wizard who had committed such grave sins. After all, according to church scriptures, the existence of evil beings was repulsed by all things, and only at the moment of a successful ritual could their power be channeled into the present world. Even if the images of the past were severed by demonic power, the identity of the person who conducted the ritual could still be investigated. Death. 10 rings divine skill. Decree, death. In an ancient and inscrutable voice, the archbishop uttered words that ordinary people could hardly comprehend. In an instant, in Nafplion city, countless bones assembling in decay froze for a moment, then disintegrated into dust in the wind. As if an invisible force had wiped out their very essence, even the vigorous vitality of the evil creatures could not save them. Only the headless divine corpse at the city center remained unchanged. Seeing this, the young man with silver-gray hair slightly heaved a sigh of relief. Luckily, it was not the worst outcome. Although the sacrificial ceremony had succeeded, the level of the sacrifice was evidently not enough to summon overly powerful forces. Except for the one in the city, there were no high-level evil creatures present. Since that was the case, even if his prayer to the angel was not answered, he alone could handle it. As for Chiron, the archbishop clearly did not consider him part of the combat strength. After all, despite his seemingly casual demeanor, the city full of evil creatures before him was enough to directly devastate several kingdoms on the continent without divine intervention. This was not merely due to their strength, but primarily because of their powerful undying nature, a trait that centaurs, whose martial skill surpassed even magic, were not adept at dealing with. Just like now, seemingly remembering he could still fight, Chiron hurriedly took a longbow from his back. He bent the bow and notched an arrow. The arrows transformed into a rain of arrows in the air, piercing through hundreds of clustered bones upon landing. Yet, when the arrow's shadows dissipated, the aura of those wicked beings only slightly waned, showing no greater reaction. It's useless. In the face of the corrupting demons of the world, only the Lord's power can confront them. Mortal martial skills are meaningless against them. Even the powers of wizards and those fake gods practitioners can do nothing but sigh at their existence. Speaking coldly, he raised the scepter again. Several rings of light appeared under the archbishop's feet, gathering a holy power far stronger than before around him. As he said, the power of evil creatures was too troublesome. The undying power stemming from their origin was permanently etched into their very essence. The most powerful among these creatures, drawing directly from the Mother Tree's power, could not be eradicated even by great divine power. Even so-called ancient evil creatures, existing one layer removed, were enough to make all true gods sigh. If these existed in small numbers, common evil creatures were truly a cause of fear for humanity. The high-level evil creatures, comparable to demigods, could not be harmed by powers that lacked authority rules. Even general deities would need decades or centuries to obliterate them, and such entities were not rare on the continent. Even though the evil creatures in Nafplion City fell short of that level, they still didn't bother with Chiron's attacks. This was the nature of evil creatures. Entities of the same realm could never truly harm them, and even higher-tier beings could only wash them away with the sands of time. If any force could deal a fatal blow to them within the same realm, it would only be authority closely tied to their origin, that is, the power of life and death. This was why Erebus, once afflicted by pollution, tried to annihilate them with the power of life, but the life phase was no longer complete, so in the end, he failed. But that was within the domain of great divine power. In the realm of mortals, both sides could barely counter each other. The thought flashed through his mind as the seemingly young archbishop focused all his energy on his divine arts. Though decreed death could indeed utterly kill these evil creatures, there were simply too many of them, and a headless divine corpse was still gestating under demonic power in the city's center. Fortunately, he was a practitioner of the church, and they were never afraid of numbers. 11 rings divine skill, Group summoning of otherworldly divine servants.
BZZZ.
In an instant, 120 pillars of light suddenly rose around Nafplion city. A sea of sacred power poured forth from the archbishop, but in mere moments, the torrent slowed to a trickle. As a summoning-type divine art, as long as the practitioner status within the church's faith system was high enough, their devotion fervent enough, the beings they could summon would far exceed the skill's level limits, with much of the consumption even borne by the summoned. Almost. Thank you all for coming to aid. His voice rang out as the light pillars converged. The archbishop could clearly see tall beings with wings and brimming with positive energy appearing before him. 108 golden celestial race members, emerging from the depths of the spirit realm, beings of positive energy, and heroic spirits of the legendary golden humanity residing in Seven Hills Paradise. But they couldn't unleash divine arts in the death domain, so the young man hoped they'd focus on consuming and gathering these evil creatures. As for the remaining 12, those were individuals whose faith during life had earned the recognition of angels, becoming demigod spirit bodies, blazing heaven divine servants upon death. Not considering the archbishop's authority, their power was equal to his, capable of easily crushing powerful demons. No matter, eradicating demons and spreading the Lord's faith is our duty, said a tall divine servant emitting blazing light concisely. Archbishop, please give the order. These sinful lives, I can tolerate them no longer. Very well, I entrust this to you all. Speaking in a deep voice, the young man's gaze swept over the centaur nearby. Compared to them, the church's own members brought him more peace of mind. Raising the scepter for the third time, the archbishop began preparing his third divine art as the celestial beings streaked across the sky heading towards Nafplion. Relying on them alone was still insufficient to combat the powerful evil creatures birthed from the divine corpse, so he had to reluctantly step in himself. It has been many years since I last fought myself. I wonder if I've grown rusty, he mused, shaking his head. Such was the life of a godhood practitioner. Wizards just needed to delve into their studies and research witchcraft day and night, but their concerns were far greater. Like how many allies to summon for a fight, how many domains of their deity's power could be readily drawn upon, and what kind of divine artifact projection to summon for different enemies. All were tricky questions. Sacred power surged, and mystical array patterns rose beneath his feet. In this moment, the archbishop sensed something and glanced toward the horizon. Is that the power of the pseudo-god king? No, it's not him. It's his heavenly empress. She is spying on the truth here. He paid no mind to her, focusing instead on dealing with the current mess first. In the center of Nafplio, hundreds of sacred light pillars descended. Chiron's arrow rain had just fallen, but it did not cause any substantial damage. However, with the archbishop's divine technique in practice, sensing the threat, the headless divine corpse finally showed some movement. Fingers slightly moved, then the entire hand, the whole arm, and even the whole body, to ensure the sacrifice ritual could at least attract a thread of attention from that supreme being, the soul's suture master, Mastermind Jordan, at the first moment of recalling his true identity, mercilessly severed the head of his captive. Hebe's awareness within the body was taken away by him, ensuring the deity's body could regenerate, albeit the new divine body might temporarily be inferior to the previous one in many aspects. The remaining part was sacrificed to the great mother of flesh. Now the ritual has concluded, and the mother tree has indeed provided sufficient response. If not for the goddess of youth's divine power being too weak, and the sacrifice ritual not being grand and perfect enough, even this incomplete divine corpse might have directly descended powerful enough strength from her to shape a new ancient evil being, causing all gods to tremble in fear. Fortunately, it was enough. Slow movements, rigid shifts. The headless divine corpse rose from the ruins, as if staring at the human holding the scepter with non-existent eyes. A feeling of being targeted surged into the archbishop's heart, alongside a foreboding sign of death springing forth. Perhaps Hebe's godhood of youth indeed approached life, while her current state aligned with the mortal meaning of death, directly endowed alternate life by the power of the mother tree. Ancient evil artifact, Skull sacrifice. Song. The invisible domain instantly expanded, the near-death feeling of hitting the soul attached to every existence present. This was a certain instant death supernatural ability akin to the effect of decree death, causing any existence below an invisible execution line to perish upon hearing. However, present were either demigods or otherworldly spirit bodies full of positive energy. Thus, facing the ancient evil's greeting, they merely felt spiritual body shudders, enduring what could slay millions of mortals, into the silent howl. Boom! 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 Almost simultaneously, 3 blazing heaven divine servants noticed the commotion here. They unanimously pointed a finger, and 3 small suns spontaneously emerged, exploding within the city carrying intense light and heat. This was 9 Rings Divine Skill Sun Flame Burst, highly damaging to entities containing negative energy. Yet, when the light dissipated, the ancient evil was unharmed, as if those were merely 3 enormous fireworks. No need to waste time on it. I'll immobilize it. On the nameless peak, the Archbishop shouted aloud. Scepter pointed downwards, the 3rd divine technique prepared long ago was unleashed instantly. Faint heave, azure divine light penetrated through the void, an endless chill rising from around. Snowflakes began to fall from the sky, fountain water froze into icy springs. The invisible cold flow seemed to materialize as shackles, intertwining towards the ancient evil. 11 Rings Divine Skill, Holy Oath, Frost Crown. Sacred power surged. The artifact shadow symbolizing winter tumbled from the depths of the spirit realm to the mortal realm. The freezing of all things, the meaning of cycle termination diffused from its form. In a flash, the ice-crowned shadow appeared above the empty neck of the ancient evil, seeming to wear itself upon the non-existent head, eternally confining the consciousness and existence there. But when it truly began to descend, a strong resistance surged from the void. The ancient evil and artifact shadow, near-god powers clashed here. Momentarily, the skull sacrifice was successfully restrained here. Taking a slight breath at this moment, the Archbishop finally had the space to glance afar. There, in another city-state far from Nafplio, some godhood practitioners seemed to be fleeing towards his location. Judging by the aura emitted by their sacred power, they appeared to be believers of Heavenly Empress Hera. Heretics. After a brief ponder, the Archbishop pointed his scepter frontward, preparing to receive those people. Heretics can be converted. If they persistently refuse, killing them isn't a concern. Yet, being corrupted by evil creatures, even their souls would be tainted and highly challenging to cleanse. Whether Olympus's Heavenly Empress would have any opinion about his conversion of her believers back towards the right path was entirely beyond his consideration. After all, with Ares personally leading the army to besiege Silver Moon City, Olympus's intentions were quite clear. War is inevitable, and there is no necessity to avoid it. Regardless, the Archbishop would never allow the heretics' armies to step onto Silver Moon City's land. Thus, when those godhood practitioners hurriedly crossed the uncertain space gate, what greeted them was a seemingly youthful face. "Look here, right, it's me." Scepter resting on the ground, while maintaining the existence of the artifact shadow, the Archbishop held forth a scripture. Facing evil creatures, choosing to flee, failing to fight till the last moment against the temple's collapse, it appears your faith lacks genuine devoutness. Nonetheless, it's all right. Maybe you haven't found the true destination for your soul. I'll help you find it. Mount Olympus, the divine palace of the Heavenly Empress. Clenching her teeth slightly, Hera gouged out the pair of eyes that seemed to have developed a dim consciousness of their own, and without changing her expression, she used her divine power to regenerate them. Although the newly born eyes still made her feel somewhat uncomfortable, the Heavenly Empress had no time to worry about such trivial matters. Once again, she exercised her divine authority and looked at the small city for the second time. Hera did not find a way to resist the erosion in such a short time. Rather, she knew that the previous situation would not happen again. The power of the Mother Tree was indeed formidable, but formidable was it itself, not the evil creatures it created. Hera had suffered such a severe blow from a distance only because she saw the moment the sacrifice took shape and the gaze cast by the mother tree. But the outer god, who is sealed away from the world, could not always watch over that place unless it had a sufficiently powerful anchor there, which Nafplion currently did not possess. Therefore, without encountering much obstruction, Hera successfully saw the image near the city this time. Subconsciously searching for Hebe's figure, however, the heavenly empress failed to find her daughter's familiar face. She only saw the city-state where shouts and fear were rampant, with priesthood practitioners and aristocrats either frantically resisting or fleeing, and the archbishop, who held a scepter and wielded powerful sacred power. Feeling somewhat irritated, Hera did not expect some of her priests to be so cowardly. But there was no helping it. After all, unless in close contact, even the gods could not accurately measure the true piety of a believer. This had been verified since the Bronze Age. To this day, Olympus could only use various methods to ensure that its priests were indeed believers, and beyond that, only legendary priests could guarantee intense faith. Nothing else, only if the faith was not devout enough, priests would face a rift between themselves and their sacred power when ascending to the legendary rank, tearing apart their very souls. Unless a deity actively suppressed this backlash, death would be their only fate. You can't entirely blame these mortals. Their strength is still too weak and utterly incapable of defeating these undying evil creatures. With a light sigh, Hera did not become overly angry. She was well aware that among the gods, only the priests of the goddess of life, Moanda, could erase the life force of sealed evil creatures or remove the contamination carried by ordinary evil creatures. Beyond that, even the divine king's followers could only place them in sacrificial temples and pray for Zeus to send down indestructible lightning to cleanse those filthy demons. So it was somewhat understandable that they chose to flee. Of course, understanding did not mean forgiveness. Others running away was one thing, but as her priests, if they couldn't even protect the temple, what use were they to her? The changes near Nafplion City did not escape the heavenly empress's notice. When hundreds of beams of light descended, the presence of the archbishop immediately caught Hera's attention. Was that the priesthood practitioner from the spirit realm? He could summon so many powerful spiritual bodies. Slightly taken aback, Hera momentarily turned her attention. Those demigod spiritual bodies were indeed extraordinary, especially on the mortal world. Unfortunately, seeing those blazing heaven divine servants, the heavenly empress knew that although she theoretically had the divine power and divinity to create demigod spiritual bodies, she did not have the actual technique in reality. Spiritual bodies like this were not something that could be created just by providing enough divine power and divinity. It belonged to a domain of soul creation and crafting. In all of Olympus, probably only the heroic spirits of the Hall of Valor were similar. However, the Hall of Valor had to suppress the starry sky and could not be used. Shifting her gaze away, Hera began to look for traces of Hebe again. In the fountain, no. The nearby city-state, no. Among the surrounding mountains, also no. Frowning slightly, Hera didn't know where the goddess of youth had gone. However, as she carefully searched, a sudden and inexplicable chill surged in her heart. Focusing her gaze, Hera immediately noticed the ice crown. A projection of a divine artifact. How boundless are the resources of the primordial gods. A flash of envy appeared in her eyes. As the heavenly empress of Olympus, she did not possess any notable divine artifacts of her own, not even better than Hebe's golden cup. Watching as the ice crown fell upon the familiar-looking headless divine corpse, Hera couldn't help but sigh in her heart. It is indeed sufficient to suppress a near-god-level evil creature with a projection of a divine artifact. But why does this ancient evil creature look so familiar? A thought flashed through her mind, and the heavenly empress could not help but observe closely. Although the headless divine corpse had been partially changed by the power of the mother tree, its overall form remained the same. At this moment, an ominous premonition surged in her heart, and an invisible pressure descended within and without the divine palace. Outside the palace, 7 sea nymphs and nymphs gathered together. They looked at the distant temple with its oppressive atmosphere, not understanding what had happened. Your Majesty, what happened? I don't know. Maybe it's something difficult to resolve. Wait, what's that? Bang. Before the words finished, a sudden booming sound overturned Hera's temple in an instant. Golden light rose from the Mount of the Gods, heading straight towards the Golden Palace on the mountaintop. Pushing open the doors of the Golden Palace, Hera strode in. Looking at the divine king who was resting on the throne, she could no longer contain her anger. Zeus, you're still here. What are you waiting for? The divine king was not all-knowing. Hera was certainly aware of this. But she also knew that Zeus could not be completely unaware of her use of the divine authority of the heavenly empress. What she saw, the divine king must have seen earlier and seen more. Yet until now, Zeus still sat here calmly without rescuing Hebe, who was deep in peril. You are the king of all gods. Taking a deep breath, Hera gave a final, cold reminder as she looked at the figure on the throne. I know, but Hebe is no longer there. I will bring her back, but not now. Opening his somewhat weary eyes, Zeus promised in a deep voice. But hearing his words, Hera only felt even more furious. Not now, but I need now. Since you won't go, I'll go myself. Bang. Turning around to leave, Hera felt that her emotions were somewhat excessive today, but with Hebe's whereabouts unknown, her reaction seemed reasonable. Not knowing what Zeus was still thinking, she had to rely on her own strength. With a flash of divine light, Hera returned before the ruined divine palace. Someone, repair it. And who was asking to see me earlier, appear before me now. The problem had already occurred. Your Majesty. Your Majesty. In front of the collapsed divine palace, crushed by the power of the heavenly empress, 7 sea nymphs and nymphs stood in a row. Summoned by Hera, the maids who guarded the orchard paid their respects to the revered deity one by one. But at this moment, the heavenly empress clearly had no mood for a lengthy conversation with them. She merely waved her hand to signal them, then directly spoke. All right, you are here to deliver the golden apples, aren't you? Normally, I would send someone to collect them, but this year you brought them yourselves. In that case, store each harvest respectively. I allow you to stay on the Mount of the Gods for a few more days. If you have no other matters, you may withdraw. Before she finished her sentence, Hera turned and prepared to leave. She didn't think these orchard guardians had any major issues to report. After all, they were more like craftsmen tending the flowers and plants than actual guards. Sea nymphs and nymphs were most skilled at this task, able to drive away the storms from the sea and let the plants thrive. However, just as she turned around and took a few steps, Hera was called back by a voice from behind. Your Majesty, we are not here to deliver the golden apples. Then why have you come? Hera turned her head and asked indifferently, her brows slightly furrowed. We came to seek aid. Hesitating for a moment, then speaking loudly. The leading sea nymph slightly gritted her teeth, bracing herself to utter the lie. The golden apples are gone. They were either destroyed or stolen. Even the demon lance guarding the orchard was killed by the enemy. Your Majesty, the vile attacker is extremely ruthless and shows no regard for you and the other gods. We clearly identified ourselves, yet he still dared to attack us, Your Majesty. Boom! No longer able to endure it, an invisible aura burst forth from Hera. Having just bottled up a bellyful of anger from Zeus, she didn't expect to encounter such a situation upon return. Her dreadful gaze swept across the 7 sea nymphs, the majesty of the heavenly empress growing stronger. However, at one moment, she forcibly suppressed her anger, attempting to calmly reconsider the matter. You mean to say, my garden was robbed by an attacker? Yes, the sea nymph twisted the truth. He claimed the golden apples rightfully belonged to him, that picking them was an act justified by heavens and earth. Naturally, we didn't believe him, so we politely informed him, Your Majesty, herald of fairness and kindness, if he insists on taking the golden apples, he should wait until Your Majesty learns of this and decides personally. We trust that if he indeed has a legitimate reason for acquiring the golden apples, your majesty would judge fairly. Even if he doesn't, perhaps the great your majesty might show mercy. But unexpectedly, he brazenly ordered us to move aside. Yet, as the maids appointed by your majesty to guard the garden, how could we be intimidated by a mere thug? Thus, we resisted vehemently. But ultimately we were defeated by him. Recounting the events from start to finish, the sea nymphs believed they had not lied. Anyway, the human had mentioned things like trial and reward, as if the golden apple ought to belong to him naturally. And their subsequent replies were only slightly embellished. The process remained essentially the same. Standing before the sea nymphs and nymphs, Hera was practically enraged. She had never expected that such audacity existed. Sensing something, Hera questioned. You said he defeated Ladon? Yes. The sea nymph nodded respectfully. Although she wasn't sure if the Empress was paying attention to events at sea recently, these were indisputable facts. Then how did you survive? Hera continued to question. Perhaps he was overly arrogant, thinking only powerful demons like Ladon were worthy of being killed by him. Quick-witted, the sea nymph concocted an excuse. Is that so? Her brows furrowed once more, feeling that this reason was quite perfunctory. But pondering it carefully, she couldn't entirely dismiss this possibility. After all, among the gods, such existences were not rare. The divine power and wisdom never equated directly. Do you recognize this assailant? Which deity is he? We do not know him. The sea nymph shook her head, reiterating their speculation. He disguised himself as a human, but how could a human possibly defeat the 100-headed dragon Ladon? That formidable demon could only be bested by the divine king. He must be an ancient god hiding his identity. Your Majesty, he might be coming for you intentionally. You must be very careful. The divine king's lovers are not limited to one. Maybe it's some goddess who requested their help. Boom! In just one night, Hera exploded with her power for the third time. Only this time, it wasn't for any other reason, but because of the stupidity and audacity of these sea nymphs. What a joke! It's one thing to replace Zeus lovers, but to think of ascending to the position of the heavenly empress. Let alone anyone else. Let's see if Zeus himself would agree to this. Moreover, even if we take 10,000 steps back and assume this is true, who are you to discuss this with me here? Enough! Coldly reprimanding them, under the oppressive might of the heavenly empress, the 7 nymphs and sea nymphs were already pressed to the ground, struggling to breathe. After a while, seemingly slightly calmed down, Hera glanced at them coldly, ultimately refraining from delivering the killing blow. I know you are afraid I will blame you for this, but that is no reason for such absurd excuses. I will investigate who exactly is behind this myself. There's no need for you to make baseless speculations here. Now, tell me, is there anything you haven't told me about the entity that invaded my garden? Your Majesty, yes. Struggling to speak, a sea nymph cried out. He said his name is Heracles. Huh? As if realizing something crucial, a thought flashed through the sea nymph's mind. Hera's glory. Such a strange name. Bum 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 bum. 7 muffled sounds, and in the final moment, she held back a bit. The 7 sea nymphs and nymphs were sent flying, immediately losing consciousness. Looking grim, Hera felt as if she had been played for a fool. Heracles, was it truly him, the son of Zeus and that mortal woman? It seems he is undergoing some so-called trials. Take them into custody. I will deal with them when I return, she said coldly. Although Hera thought these sea nymphs and nymphs were somewhat foolish, there was one thing they wouldn't dare lie about: the golden apples must be gone. Heracles, you dare to seize my entire garden in one fell swoop? Rage welled up in her heart, but at this moment, the heavenly empress also noticed a critical issue. Could it be that the 100-headed dragon Ladon was truly killed by them? She hadn't really focused on this matter. After all, she is not the sea god, and rarely exercises her authority as the heavenly empress. If that's the case, with this thought in mind, Hera stood up and flew out of Mount Olympus. Some golden apples were a minor issue. The whereabouts of Hebe were her primary concern now. If after all these years this human had become so capable, then perhaps she could make use of him. I wonder where Zephyrus has gone. It is best to leave this matter to him. Silently contemplating, Hera flew away. In the place she had left, a long time after her departure, accompanied by painful groans, several sea nymphs woke up from unconsciousness. What happened? A trace of confusion flashed in their eyes. Then, as if remembered something, the sea nymphs wore an expression of realization. Heracles, could he be the illegitimate son of the heavenly empress? No wonder he claimed the golden apples were his rightful reward. With this realization came a sudden wave of despair. Oh heavens! She hadn't recognized the offspring of the heavenly empress and even went to complain to Hera herself. What to do now? A flash of fear crossed her face, but in the next moment, it was replaced by resoluteness. I can't resign myself to this. Lightly clenching her fist, the sea nymph knew, having discovered such a secret, Hera might not have killed them immediately, only to avoid drawing too much attention by acting impulsively. But once Hera came to her senses, she would have 1,001 reasons to execute her. So the question is, looking around Olympus, who else could save her life? Divine King, I need to report this to him. Yes, only His Majesty can save me now. As if clutching the last straw, the sea nymph was overwhelmed with excitement. As long as she could continue to accuse Heracles of his misdeeds, Zeus might also accidentally discover Heracles' true identity, as she had. Whether this method would work or not, she had to believe it would. Closing her eyes again, she continued to feign unconsciousness. She seemed to be locked up now, though nobody thought she could escape from Olympus, so the security of her cell was extremely lax. But she couldn't leave rashly. She needed to find a day when she was sure to meet the Divine King, and it had to be before Hera returned. Silently praying, the sea nymph hoped that day would come soon. At the same time, a sense of annoyance flickered in her heart. She just wanted to eat a few golden apples. Was that wrong? How did things escalate to this extent without her realizing it? Nonetheless, what's done is done. She had to tell herself that if anything else happened because of this, it wouldn't be her fault, and she need not bear any responsibility for it. Yes, the true culprit was that mortal. Heracles it is. Once the Divine King discovers your true identity, he will personally make sure you meet a grim end. On the earth below, as the heavenly empress left the Mount of the Gods, the battle between the evil creatures and the archbishop continued. However, facing the rare demigod priest in the mortal realm, no matter how powerful the ancient evil creatures, they were destined to be defeated by the 12 blazing heaven divine servants and the projection of the divine artifact. The outcome was already clear, and the archbishop's prior prayers had not been answered by any angels. In fact, approaching the imminent confrontation with Ares, a special divine decree descended, delivered to 2 others who spread the glory of the Lord in the mortal realm. Respectfully receiving the divine decree, the 2 archbishops conferred for a moment. Their accounts of what happened in Nafplio quickly reached a consensus. But unlike in the past, this time a certain archbishop, historically radical and fervent, relinquished his stance, accepting the other's perspective. Because the other told him, in matters like this, such a statement would likely cause most uninformed mortals to misunderstand the Lord's glory. But his statement would be different. Speech is an art, the old man said, and the old woman finally chose to accept it. But once the decision was made, they did the same thing, which was to relay the events to the goddess of the magic net. Allowing wizards to control the mystery lock had proven to be a wrong decision. They gradually realized that perhaps for wizards above legendary rank, coexistence with the church was indeed difficult. Because they sought longevity, strength, and ascension to godhood, but the church did not. Longevity was never something humans were meant to attain, and in seeking it, wizards would almost inevitably touch upon taboos. Slaying one wave, another would rise. Expelling one wave, another would come anew. A certain decision was brewing in the old woman's mind, but regardless of her intentions, she could not bypass the existence of the goddess of the magic net, Hecate. So on the earth below, as the war on the young archbishop's side against the evil creatures neared its end, in the starry skies, on an unnamed desolate star, Hecate received 3 messages from different sources. One from Chiron, one from the young man with him, and another from the front line welcoming Ares. Merely glancing at the messages, Hecate chose not to read any of them. She simply moved her fingers and erased them casually from the star space. Hecate. Beside the girl in the red dress, a silver chariot stood by. Artificial magic net. Selene had certainly heard of it, and it left a very deep impression. She still remembers a night long ago when Hecate excitedly told her that a mortal wizard was trying to decipher the essence of the magic net and even trying to create a new one. At that time, the moon goddess undoubtedly found it odd, not only because of the absurdity of the mortal's ambitions but also due to her friend's reaction. The former was easy to understand. After all, the magic net is such a great and vast masterpiece. How could a mere mortal without divine essence attempt to deconstruct the magic net? It was simply a fantasy. Furthermore, at that human's level, he couldn't even fully contact the 12th layer of the magic net structure, let alone create a new one. As for the latter, the authority of true gods is the face and strength of the deities themselves. Now, a mortal dares to spy on your divine authority, and instead of eliminating him, you appear jubilant. Selene couldn't comprehend it, so she didn't plan to hide her doubts. Facing the moon goddess's question, Hecate's answer back then was very intriguing. I remember you told me you are the goddess of the magic net, the pioneer, builder, and ultimately its master. It will be perfected in your hands, taking root in every corner of reality. But that's all. You're its beginning, but not its entirety. You've known this since the day it was born. So you are not angry about the birth of the artificial magic net. Instead, you are mostly happy. You hope that someone will study it, perfect it, master it, and ultimately be mastered by it. So when the centaur who discovered the existence of the artificial magic net came to you in a panic, asking for your opinion, you told him that you never saw research on the magic net as sacrilege. On the contrary, it's the wizards expressing their respect for the pioneers on the path of witchcraft, using their wisdom. On a nameless star body, beside a silver carriage, Selene, struggling to play the role of listener, thinker, problem solver, was immediately reverted to her original state by the red-dressed girl within 3 seconds. Fortunately, the moon goddess had grown accustomed to this. She just twisted her neck under Hecate's sanction to see the other's eyes. So what do these messages have to do with the artificial magic net? Did its research fail? Exactly. Nodding her head, swinging her little leg nonchalantly, Hecate agreed with Selene's statement. Indeed, it failed, just like when I once taught young Chiron. Maybe I'm not very good at playing the role of a guide. It feels like every promising start hasn't borne fruit in my hands. Zeus might be good at this, but he's no longer the golden-haired guy I first met. I don't want to deal with him at all now. Perhaps others are good at these things, but I don't know them. So that's it then. Try a few more times, and it will eventually succeed. But speaking of which, Hecate looked at the moon goddess with a slight tilt of her head. Since they are all unreliable, Selene, why don't you give it a try? Try what? The goddess in the moon-white gauze dress seemed confused. Hecate's eyes widened in surprise. Didn't I mention it before? No, you didn't? Selene puffed up her cheeks lightly, a bit annoyed. Really? Feeling a bit embarrassed, Hecate waved her hand. So you didn't know? But it's not important. It's not too late to tell you now. She organized her thoughts, and under the accusing gaze of the moon goddess, she casually explained her idea. Actually, it's quite simple. I mainly need your help to replace me as the goddess of the magic net. Cough, cough. Wait, what did you just say? Selene's voice broke a bit as her eyes widened in disbelief. Hecate seemed nonchalant, shaking her head as if the other was making a fuss over nothing. Yes, you heard right. Just temporarily take over as the goddess of the magic net for me. How about it? Doesn't it sound enticing? This is the magic web, which is much more powerful than your moon. Hecate, have you gone mad? No deity voluntarily relinquishes their godhood. And how could I possibly steal your godhood? In disbelief, the moon goddess felt as if she was dreaming at that moment. But in front of her, seeing Selene's reaction, Hecate simply thought for a moment. Then, a water-blue shadow gathered behind her, evolving into another her. In an instant, an invisible impact seemed to spread outward. Unlike the red-dressed girl's lively demeanor, the appearance of the blue-dressed figure on this nameless celestial body seemed to bring tranquility and peace to the entire starry sky. With hands crossed at her right waist, the blue-dressed Hecate stepped forward. Although her face was almost identical, her mere presence exuded a soft, water-like gentleness. I am not mad. Selene, this is precisely my path. In fact, the true goddess of the magic net is me. I am the one born because of the magic web. And the one willing to relinquish this authority is also me, never anyone else. Speaking softly, the girl squatted down. And in front of her, gazing at the faint smile on the blue-dressed Hecate's lips, Selene felt she was looking at the vast and boundless magic net itself. I am its pioneer, but not its entirety. The magic net is Hecate's authority, but it is not her entirety either. Thousands of years ago, she ended her mortal life over the East Sea. When the magic net was born, I emerged. As for now, when the third era comes to the end, the magic net will achieve perfection in my hands. From that day on, the next me will arrive. I see. But Hecate, I still don't understand. Nodding lightly and falling silent for a moment, a trace of confusion flashed in Selene's eyes. She tried to comprehend the words of the blue-dressed Hecate, but the mysteries of triphased incarnation were truly beyond her knowledge. Seeing this, the blue-clad girl only smiled softly, while the red-dressed girl poked her in dissatisfaction. So troublesome, fine. I'll explain it properly. Hecate pouted, but she understood. Triphased incarnation was a unique talent, but just like a shared witchcraft legacy, it often resulted in different outcomes in different hands, and the existence of triphased beings varied. Even their choices could lead them down vastly different paths. It was partly by chance that she walked this path. Unlike the triphased incarnation of the legendary Master of Eternal Night, although Hecate didn't really know what the forms of that entity's incarnations were. In ancient myths, Nyx's triphased and herself were always separate, like they were independent entities, but that was not the case for her. In her original trajectory, Hecate had the image of 3 heads and 3 bodies, and it manifested in old, middle, and young forms. But no matter how they were divided, her 3 phases were always mutually representative and unified. Inseparable, indivisible. Rather than 3 different entities, it was more an expression of 3 different aspects of the same existence. In this era, Hecate perfected this to a greater degree. Her first incarnate, the red-dressed girl, represented her innate identity, everything she was born with and experienced in the mortal world. And by the day of the epic's transition, when she successfully wove the magic net and ascended to divinity, it symbolized the completion of her journey from birth to godhood. The red-dressed incarnate was thus complete, and the goddess of the magic net who descended from the sea was born. They were all Hecate, yet none were the complete Hecate. Thus from that day, the old path ended, and a new task named Perfection of the Magic Net was born. As the second phase of Hecate's incarnation, her blue-dressed self was born with the magic net. Therefore, in order to complete herself, she had to perfect the magic net. Of course, absolute perfection doesn't exist. Relative perfection is sufficient. Though it was challenging, at least at the end of this era, Hecate was confident she could achieve it at some moment. But at the same time, another problem arose. For when relative perfection of the magic net was achieved, Hecate's second incarnate had to withdraw from the magic net while at her peak. Otherwise, as the fleeting moment of relative perfection passed, her second incarnation would return to a state of imperfection. Only by promptly appointing the next goddess of the magic net, relinquishing her role merely as the pioneer of the magic net, the sculptor of the magic net, and the perfecter of the magic net, could she smoothly abdicate and any future flaws would be irrelevant to her, becoming entirely the responsibility of the second god of the magic net. Regarding this, Hecate naturally knew from the very day the magic net was pioneered. Thus she took on an apprentice resembling her, to achieve longevity, a demigod, and possibly abandoned centaur. She hoped he could follow in her footsteps, rising to the peak of near godhood, and then take over her position as the god of the magic net at the next epic transition. But this notion did not last long. Over time, Hecate gradually realized that Chiron, despite his diligence, simply did not have the capability. He was smart, with great talent, especially in astrology. So I initially thought he was merely absorbed in prophecy and magic potions rather than lacking innate ability. But later, stark reality proved me wrong. His talent in witchcraft was no better than other demigods, and in fact, quite unremarkable in that area. Ironically, he seemed to have a natural sensitivity to martial skills and archery. But by the time I realized this, it was somewhat too late. Shaking her head slightly, Hecate could hardly judge the matter. Upon realizing Chiron's talent wasn't in witchcraft, she earnestly informed him that given his abilities, he might never meet her expectations. As the goddess of the magic net, she was naturally disappointed. But as the teacher to her first apprentice, Hecate hoped he could promptly identify his strengths, no longer expending energy on the path of a spellcaster due to her. He could delve into martial skills and archery, honing his physique, though Hecate couldn't mentor him in these aspects. Yet, despite verbally accepting the reality, the centaur never gave up in his heart. Without interrupting, she let another version of herself recount that past. Only when talking about the human's research did the girl in the red dress furrow her brows. This is another characteristic of the triphased incarnation. Regarding the same matter, they often have completely different perspectives because of their differing natures. Like her, as the original Hecate, her disposition leans more towards chaotic good. So, when she noticed that human's choice in her heart, she didn't like him. However, conversely, the Hecate in the blue dress is the true god of the magic net, and her nature aligns more closely with the essence of the magic net. Regardless of good or evil, justice or corruption, the magic net is open to anyone willing to follow its rules, no matter who it may be. Even if someone uses the power of the magic net to attack her subordinate, the god of the magic net, she would not revoke their right to use the magic net, unless they attack her directly, not because she considers herself special, but because it would go against the fundamental order of the magic net, as harming the creator of the magic net equates to destroying the magic net itself. If assessing the nature of the girl in the blue dress using the same 9-grid system, her alignment would be true neutral. For everything unrelated to her, be it gods or humans, as long as it does not impede the development of the magic net or touch her core, then existence itself justifies reason. So, although she couldn't fully accept the other version of her own thoughts, the Hecate in the red dress had to admit that this is the god the magic net needs. It's just a pity that the intelligent beings now still lack a sense of existence. Though they can provide faith, even the destroyed past still holds some power, but it's too insignificant. As individuals born after the world, they are as small as dust. As a race, a whole, they do not occupy enough of a position in the world to let their existence support a level of grandeur. Otherwise, with the magic net permeating all aspects of the lives of intelligent beings step by step, I wouldn't have to wait for the turn of eras to pursue its relative perfection. But there's nothing to be done about it. After all, if not for faith, who would pay attention to mortals? Calmly, the blue dress incarnation gradually faded away, returning to Hecate's body, or rather, merging into the omnipresent magic net. There is no need to respond to the information from the mortal world. Whether to limit the wizard's power will be for the next god of the magic net to decide. As for the wizard who escaped, whether he dies, the god of the magic net will not feel regret. If he lives, the god of the magic net will not feel anger either. Even if he becomes a god, it would have nothing to do with the creator of the magic net. That would be a matter for another version of herself. She would only quietly wait for the day of the end, whether that day is tomorrow or forever. Hiss, amazing. Gently inhaling. The voice was calm, and the blue-skirted incarnation gradually faded away, returning to Hecate's body or merging into the omnipresent magic net. There was no need to respond to the information from the mortal realm. Whether to restrict the wizards could be left to the next god of the magic net to decide. As for the wizard who escaped, if he died, the god of the magic net would not regret it. If he lived, the god of the magic net would not be angry either. Even if he could become a god, it had nothing to do with the one who created the magic net. That was another version of her. She would only quietly wait for the end of the era, whether that day was tomorrow or never. This, so powerful. Selene marveled softly, watching the other Hecate vanish behind the red-skirted girl. Although she knew about Hecate's gift of the triphased incarnation, and had seen this blue incarnation before. But seeing both forms of the other appear simultaneously was genuinely a first. Especially when these two incarnations separated and merged. An inexplicable feeling welled up in the moon goddess's heart. As Hecate said, her innate gift was extremely special. So special that the triphased incarnations of different deities could have entirely different forms and abilities, and her triphased incarnation possessed an ancient and primordial power. Even the combination of two peak divine powers could not rival the great divine power. Yet the first divine king, who united the undefined symbols of the sky and patriarchy, could single-handedly suppress Mother Earth even when severely injured. Many later speculations emerged about this. Some believed it was the result of an initial mysterious power of divine sovereignty. Some said it was because the sky and patriarchy were so compatible, just like life and death formating samsara. Others thought it came from an unreplicable, ancient miracle from the primordial era before the 12 Titans were born. Selene didn't know which was correct, but she vaguely felt that perhaps the triphased incarnation could also break limits. Because when Hecate's incarnations merged, even though both incarnations still had a long way to the pinnacle of great divine power, she felt a sensation of being near unrivaled. Even the joint forces of Oceanus and Theseus could not compare to Hecate at that moment. Hecate, have you touched the domain of the divine king and primordial gods? The moon goddess asked explicitly, not hiding her curiosity. No. Hecate shook her head slightly, spreading her hands. The triphased incarnation is indeed powerful, but no matter what, you need to have 3 first. Even if she had 3, Hecate didn't know if it would work. After all, chaos hadn't set an example. In fact, the more she delved into her powers, the more she thought of that ancient night god. Unlike herself, the legend of Nyx's triphased incarnation had been passed down since the creation, not gradually emerging. Moreover, unlike her, Nyx possessed 3 additional incarnations, not just 3 aspects of herself. I don't know if the Master of Eternal Night gained her current power through this triphased union, or if she was already that powerful. If it's the former, it's fine. If it's the latter, I wonder who in this world could rival her when her triphased incarnations unite. Or put it another way, is there a possibility that even Nyx herself cannot perfectly control her incarnations? A speculative thought flashed through her mind, only to be dismissed immediately. There was no need to ponder for long because Mother Night was the most recluse among the primordial gods. Even Tartarus now had demons and devils. But regarding the land of eternal night, mortal records remained blank. So, putting the thought aside casually, Hecate stood up and stretched lazily. Let's go. No point in staying here any longer. War is brewing in the mortal world again. Endless conflicts, truly boring. Soon, a silver chariot departed from this nameless star domain. Only a barren star body and car marks were left behind. In the mortal realm, hundreds of miles outside Condonia City, at the farthest reach of the faiths of all countries on the continent. Comparatively, the vanished Nafplion seemed like the heart of all divine faiths. Wizards, demons, god-defiling demigods, faithless mortals. All were common sights here. Smuggling, vendettas, and robbery were the most common activities nearby. Even before Heracles passed through here, the infamous Hydra was a frequent guest in this area. Strictly speaking, as a son of Typhon, it never actually came here. Its body parts were just regularly sold here by merchants and certain aristocrats. After all, as an undying demonic creature, comparable in vitality to ancient evil beings, the Hydra was never famed for sheer strength. So almost periodically, it was beheaded, flayed, scaled, bled, and then brought here for sale, occasionally propping up some hero's fame. It's not that nobody questioned this matter, but kid, some things you can't question. At a roadside stall, an old man with a straw hat chuckled, looking at the wealthy customers before him. Golden-haired, valiant in middle age, armored, young, and handsome, probably a father and son. With a sly look, the old man gave a knowing smile. Hey, I guarantee this is real Hydra meat. Nourishing, aphrodisiac, very effective. What, you don't believe me? You don't have to believe me, but you should believe the great war god. It's clearly recorded in the war god church's scriptures. When the divine king ended the monstrous disasters troubling the world, the deities descended to protect the humans on earth, preventing the offspring of the king of all monsters from wreaking havoc. Unlike empty name, can't even harm a lion's skin sun god Apollo, the great war god personally beheaded 8 of Hydra's heads, skinning, dismembering, and torturing it before leaving. To reward the heroes who bravely resisted the demonic calamity during Typhon's disaster, the esteemed Ares even prepared a full snake feast in his temple. So, young man, I swear by the great war god, this Hydra meat is of the same kind. It's the diet of ancient heroes. The old man chuckled, continuing to peddle his goods. Wealthy out-of-towners like these were hard to find, and with Heracles' news of suppressing Hydra spreading, business was slowing down for him. Lost in his nostalgic tale, the old man failed to notice the young man's increasingly darkening face under the armor. Under the armor, the joints were cracking more and more frequently. Forcing a smile, the war god himself awkwardly glanced at his father. That damned old commoner still babbling on, and unfortunately, the divine king seemed absent-minded, showing no sign of leaving. Zeus's presence seemed to make the old man misinterpret his interest. Unable to endure anymore, despite his father being right there, Ares exerted a bit of his power, snuffing out the old man's life force, then dragging his soul into his divine kingdom, in line with all the oaths he'd sworn. Long ago, specifically when Zephyrus returned to Olympus. From his words, Zeus had already learned a secret that was enough to shock all gods. The ancient son of the primordial titans, Astraeus, had actually fallen from the stars long ago, arriving in the mortal realm during the Typhon disaster. But until receiving this news, even Zeus himself had not thought that those who played with witchcraft, the faithless, could be so crazed and overstepping. Humans imprisoning deities is not unheard of in the past. But mortals treating a deity as if it were livestock, even throughout ancient history, it was the first time for him, Zeus, to see such a thing. The moment he learned of this news, the divine king's first reaction was to slice this human into 1,000 pieces and rescue the god of the stars from his hands. But just a moment later, having calmed down, Zeus hesitated. As a god, even out of the thought of empathy, he should immediately resolve this issue. But as a god-king, even though he has the duty to solve this problem, how to solve it and handle it is another matter altogether. It should be known, for the order of sovereignty that Zeus personally shaped, any existence within the scope of his order must abide by his rules. This can bring him strength and further establish his advantage on his home ground. But conversely, if he himself breaks his order, that advantage will also be lost. Thus, sovereignty has no home ground, yet it can be everywhere. Under such circumstances, even if he wants to unify the present world, he needs a reason to start the war that conforms to his order. That reason could be Achilles or the rescued Chiron, but compared to the former two, a deity treated by wizards in such a manner is undoubtedly a better reason. After all, no matter what, the enemy he is facing is a genuine primordial god. When confronting such an existence, no one would think they have prepared too much. Ares, remember what the rumors mentioned. The reason those wizards act so recklessly is because they rely on something. They've even done more blasphemous things than sacrificing an entire city's life to summon the ancestor of the evil creatures. As for what, better to leave a bit of speculation for now. Secrets are always more alluring just before they're revealed, aren't they? Speaking lightly, Zeus looked at the agreeable Ares and silently shook his head in his heart. Regarding that underground palace, which could be called a mass grave, Zephyrus had long used his divine power to replicate what he saw. After Ares' war ends, it will be him, God King Zeus, standing on the moral high ground to formally declare war. Just wondering if the Lord of the Spirit Realm can still sit quietly as he does today, ignoring the mortal realm then? There should be no problem. Confirming his plans, Zeus waved his hand, signaling Ares could leave. Instructing the war god was just incidental. His presence here today was because he ought to be here. The great war in the mortal realm is starting. How could he miss it as one of the main characters? Outside Condonia City, on an unnamed hillside, sunlight fell, but it slightly distorted when passing through a certain spot. At this moment, an invisible barrier was enveloping this area. It shielded from external spying but didn't hinder those inside from looking out. Within the barrier, several hooded figures gathered here. If observed closely, perhaps one would discover that standing here were the wizards who had recently signed the devil contract. However, unlike the previous satisfaction and ease, the surrounding atmosphere was noticeably somber. Recently, have any of you discovered anything? At a certain moment, someone spoke up first. His voice carried a hint of hard-to-detect anxiety and a bit of dissatisfaction and anger. However, strangely, when his words fell, the others present did not respond. Frowning, the speaker looked from under his hood at the nearby individuals. He didn't believe they hadn't sensed it. There was clearly a problem with the contract they had signed earlier. According to the prior agreement, they were here to buy time and attract attention, while that old undying guy was supposed to act personally, using some means to capture an immortal deity. The god of the stars, Astrius, an ancient god unaccepted by mainstream divine courts. One must say, the old guy's choice was crafty. Even if this deity went missing, it should not attract much notice. And to show his determination and sincerity, the other party explicitly stated in the contract that if his capture plan failed, he would share all his research on deities with them. Such conditions couldn't be better, so after confirming the contract had no issues, everyone signed their names and cast witchcraft to prohibit contact on it one by one. They didn't want the contract's existence to be known by outsiders, especially the church. Yet not long ago, the witchcraft on that contract was triggered. Someone touched it, there was no doubt about it. Feeling agitated, the speaker once again swept his gaze around. He didn't believe they hadn't sensed such contact, but the people present seemed unresponsive to it. After a long silence, he had no choice but to ask bluntly, "The contract has been tampered with. You all should have noticed. Someone who is not a signatory of the contract has seen it. Aren't you all even a little bit nervous? If the contract is exposed, the church will definitely expel us from Silver Moon City, and the gods even more so. Long ago, to be exact, when Zephyrus returned to Olympus. From Zephyrus's mouth, Zeus had already learned the secret that would shock all gods. The ancient son of the primordial Titans, the Titans god Astrius, had fallen from the star cluster long ago and arrived in the mortal realm during the Typhon disaster. It was only until he received this message that even Zeus himself hadn't realized that those wizards playing with witchcraft were so crazy and presumptuous. Humans imprisoning deities, it was not unheard of in history. But mortals treating deities like livestock, even looking over ancient history, it was the first time for him, Zeus. When he learned of this news, the first reaction of the God King was to tear that human into 1,000 pieces and rescue the god of the stars from his hands. But just a moment later, Zeus, having calmed down, hesitated. As a god, even out of a sense of kindred compassion, he should immediately deal with this issue. But as a divine king, although he had more of an obligation to resolve this, the specific way to deal with it was a different matter. He had to know that for the sovereign order he personally established, any existence within his order had to follow his rules. This could bring him strength and further shape the advantages of his arena. But conversely, if he himself violated his own order, then this advantage would also dissipate. So, the sovereign had no home court, but he could make any place his home court. And under such circumstances, even if he wanted to unify the present world, he needed a reason to go to war that aligned with his order. This reason could be Achilles, it could be Chiron who had been rescued, but compared to the first two, a deity subjected to such treatment by wizards was undoubtedly a better reason. After all, no matter what, the enemy he faced was an authentic primordial gods. Facing such an existence, no one would feel overly prepared. Ares, remember to mention in those rumors. Those wizards are so unrestrained because they have their own backing. In addition to sacrificing an entire city to summon the ancestor of evil creatures, they have done even more blasphemous things. As for what it is, let's leave a bit of speculation for now. Secrets are always more enticing before they are revealed, aren't they? Zeus spoke lightly, looking at the obedient Ares, silently shaking his head in his heart. Regarding that place, which was like a 10,000-person grave, Zephyrus had long since used his divine power to recreate what he saw. When Ares's war ends, it will be time for him, God King Zeus, to formally declare war from a moral high ground. It's just that when that day comes, who knows if the Lord of the spirit realm will still be able to sit quietly, ignoring the mortal realm as he does today. Well, there shouldn't be any problems. After confirming his plan, Zeus waved his hand, indicating that Ares could leave. Ordering the war god was just incidental. His presence here today was mostly because he was supposed to be here. The great war in the mortal realm was about to begin. How could he, one of the main characters, be absent? Outside Condonia City, on an unnamed hill, the sunlight fell, but slightly twisted as it passed through a specific location. At this moment, an invisible barrier was enveloping this place. It obscured external prying eyes but did not hinder the people inside from looking out. Within the barrier, several figures cloaked in hoods gathered here. Upon closer inspection, one might find that those standing here were none other than the wizards who had recently signed the devil contract. But unlike their previous satisfaction and composure, at this moment, the atmosphere around was noticeably somber. Lately, have you discovered anything? At a certain moment, someone spoke up first. His voice held a barely perceptible agitation, along with some dissatisfaction and anger. But strangely, when his voice fell, none of those present reacted. Frowning, the speaker looked from under his hood at the people around him. He didn't believe they hadn't felt it. The problem with the contract they previously signed was clearly present. According to the prior agreement, they were here to buy time, attract attention, while that old undying guy was personally responsible for capturing an undying deity using some means. The god of the stars, Astrius, an ancient god not accepted by the mainstream divine court. It had to be said that old guy's choice was clever. Even if this deity disappeared, it shouldn't attract much attention. To show his determination and sincerity, he even explicitly wrote in the contract that if his capture plan failed, he would share all his research on deities with them. Such conditions couldn't be better, so after confirming the contract had no issues, the others signed their names one after another and individually performed witchcraft to prevent contact on it. They didn't want to let the existence of this contract be known to outsiders, especially the church. But just a short while ago, the witchcraft on that contract was tampered with. Someone touched it without a doubt. Irritated, the speaker scanned his eyes around again. He couldn't believe they hadn't felt this tampering. Yet those present seemed to have no reaction. After a long silence, he had to plainly state, "The contract has been tampered with. You all should have noticed. Someone who is not a signatory of the contract has seen it. Aren't you all even a little bit nervous? If the contract is exposed, the church will definitely expel us from Silver Moon City, and the gods might personally hunt us down. If you don't plan to discuss how to deal with this, why did we gather here today? Of course, to determine a safe means of communication, what else?" After a moment of silence, someone calmly replied, "You must be joking if you think we'd investigate who tampered with the contract and why. Let's not kid ourselves. Though if possible, I would not want to embrace the undying. But if driven to a corner, the life box isn't out of consideration. Speaking of which, do you have any suggestions for the means of communication? What do you mean? Shocked, the wizard who spoke first seemed to suddenly realize something. Looking at his usual companions, he felt like he had been abandoned by them. What, are you all planning to flee because of an unknown tampering with the contract? What if it was an accident? Haha, it's all the same. And you're overthinking, we don't intend to flee either. Laughing lightly, the old woman shook her head slightly. We are all people without a path forward, unwilling to join the demons or any other power. That's why we accepted the old guy's invitation. But is he truly trustworthy? The war must go on. Attention must be drawn. But going back to check the contract is unnecessary. If it was an accident, there's nothing to worry about. If it fell into the hands of the church, going back now would just add another layer of deserting in face of the enemy to our charges. However, war is war. Having no path forward is having no path forward. You may not have a direction to move forward, but you should always have a backup retreat, right? Life box or anything else, at this point, it's just taking one step at a time. Planting her staff, the old woman no longer paid attention to the wizard with the ugly expression. She slowly scanned the people present, offering a somewhat reliable proposal. Next day, at the peak of the nameless mountain, Lane built a pavilion out of nothing. Standing in front of the pavilion, the view of the earth stretches thousands of miles, though it's not an exaggeration, for the land of chaos is not round. How far you can see depends only on how far you have the ability to see. So setting up an alchemy long tube telescope that could ignore clouds and fog, Lane was ready to watch the show. Although strictly speaking, one side of this grand show was his believers, and in theory he should not take such an indifferent attitude. But to be honest, Lane's heart was indeed calm at this moment, with not a single bit of worry for those believers. After all, if he really cared about human faith, Silver Moon City wouldn't have been hiding in the southeast corner of the earth, but would have started conquering the continent long ago. Do you want to watch too? Adjusting the focus of the alchemy long tube telescope, Lane casually asked. Although he didn't turn around, he could feel a pair of eyes eagerly watching the alchemy construct. However, hesitating for a moment, Clotho, squatting next to the huge loom with her hands around her knees, decisively shook her head. I don't want to. The fates will never use things that do not conform to the order of destiny. They are born with original sin. It is the punishment imposed by fate. The girl in the white dress spoke with great fervor, not knowing from whom she had learned it. In this regard, Lane leaned towards Atropos, because that old woman indeed seemed like a fates who loved to shout, "You are guilty." Although, from a certain perspective, what she said did have some truth to it. You're right. Nodding affirmatively, Lane acknowledged what Clotho said. Heaven and earth create all things to nurture humans. Yet humans complain of heaven's ruthlessness. All things in heaven and earth are born because of the world. This is the cause. Being bound by fate to reach a destined end. This is the effect. Humans want to break free from the destined effect, but cannot change the equally destined cause. This is indeed the sin. It's just that the world could not really destroy all things within itself to punish their sins. So the fates became the scapegoat. Thus, the poison of fate tangled around you, until one day you could no longer bear this endless, intensifying sin, and then boom. You turned into a firework on the river of fate. Shivering as the boom sounded, Clotho didn't want to speak anymore. Even though she now wanted to ask, since you agreed with my idea, why don't you kill me or let me kill you first to avoid suffering in the future? But looking at this demon king who had killed her two elder sisters one after another, Clotho felt that she had exhausted her courage before. At this moment, the fates just felt really pitiful. They had been the scapegoats since birth, and up to now, they had been taking turns, 3 sisters in rotation. Just as Clotho was immersed in her internal struggle, a copper shadow descended from the sky and hit her on the head. Ouch! What are you doing? Don't you know? Gods can be killed but not humiliated. Covering her forehead, with the other hand holding the fallen brass long mirror, Clotho angrily stared at Lane's back. Oh, sorry. I've truly never heard of this saying. Apologizing insincerely, Lane casually pointed to the nearby rack, indicating that she could place the other long mirror there to use. But now this construct not belonging to the current fate has become a weapon harming the fates. Even if it's just to know yourself and your enemy, you might as well try it with a critical perspective. After all, when the Divine King makes a move, with the volume of great divine power, even lightly brushing against the flowers and plants would be another heavy blow of fate. Speaking lightly, Lane suggested, watching how you get hit before the hit. This should make sense, right? Hugging her knees, Clotho missed her two sisters. If they were here, they wouldn't let this Demon King run rampant. On the nameless peak, time passed second by second. The sun rose and fell, spreading golden radiance over the mountain. Lane played with the long mirror, tea, and books, while the fates gazed blankly at all of it. Until another dawn arrived. In the distant earth, killing intent and battle intent began to gather. The sound of great drums made from the hides of ancient beast demons thundered, hurting Clotho's eardrums. This was not caused by physical sound, but the prediction brought by the sound resounding in fate. The ominous warning had arrived, and that land would be stained with blood. Someone who shouldn't live might live, and someone who shouldn't die might die there. At this moment, Clotho felt that Lane's words made some sense. Perhaps facing death head-on, though cruel, was better than waiting for death. Hey! Feeling her rapidly beating heart, the courage that had almost run out seemed to be slightly restored under the pressure of fear. Hugging the now gigantic spindle, the fates couldn't help but ask Lane once more. Hey! Lane turned his head, giving a puzzled look. I mean, Demon King who destroys the fate of the world, can you really not kill me? Slightly biting her lip, Clotho asked loudly. You clearly love to destroy fate so much, and am I not a part of it? If you can kill me, it should be a good thing. Even though I have no idea why you want to destroy fate, nor do I understand why you won't kill me. But those who destroy fate, have you really never felt a bit of guilt and remorse? In this world, there are countless beings who shouldn't have died that died because of you, and there are countless beings who should have been abandoned by the times that exist because of you. I don't understand. What's wrong with fate? Why do you oppose it? It is clearly the will of the world, the rule of all beginnings. If you all follow it, then. If we all follow it, then from this moment on, the world would inevitably head towards its destined end. With a faint voice, Lane lightly shook his head, then turned his attention back to the distant battlefield. Actually, there's a perfect example to answer your question. You see, the Divine King is the ruler chosen by the present world, yet all the Divine Kings throughout history have been tirelessly seeking to resist fate. On this earth, all beings are in pursuit of glimpsing the future, but when they truly receive a prophecy, not a single one of them feels satisfied by it. It's not just me. All beings in this world who come into contact with fate want to understand it, and all who understand it want to change it. Even if in accordance with the wishes of all living beings, fate should not exist like this. Though from this perspective, Clotho, perhaps this is also why you are different from your sisters. Not understanding, Clotho just held her spindle. Is it hard to understand? With a meaningful tone, Lane spoke with a smile. You see, the Divine King defies fate, but they never defy their destiny to become the Divine King. All beings are unwilling to be satisfied, but they also do not resist the grace they have already received. Neither I nor all gods, nor even all the beings in this world, we have always hated not fate itself, but the predestined, the fate predestined by others. So the god who cuts fate died because she wanted to cut others' fate. The god who measures fate also died because she wanted to control others' lives. But you, Clotho, only you, the god who weaves fate, you don't want to change anyone, so no one comes to change you. So why don't you stay here with me and watch this grand show? Clotho, your future does not belong to me. But after today ends, I will take you to find the deity you truly belong to. Just as Lane once said, the only thing that can harm fate is fate itself. He could imprison Atropus, Hermes could imprison Lachesis. But in this world, as long as Clotho does nothing, no one can do anything to her. And the irony is, when the deity and the godhood influence each other, Clotho's nature is to do nothing. She only writes the inherent fate, and then her two sisters shape the correct script from it. In a way, perhaps among the three fates, Clotho is the closest to the pillar of fate itself, rather than just a so-called deity acting out the fate of the present world. Thousands of miles away, on the walls of Condonia City, unlike the ease on the nameless peak, an invisible murderous atmosphere gathered around. The loosely but orderly formed military formations assembled under command, and the armor covered with secret patterns did not reflect any light under the sun. The wizards who were conferring in secret a few days ago stood on the city wall watching this scene, and in the more distant horizon, a great and majestic blood energy and fighting spirit soared into the sky, led by the god of war. Thousands of people fill the earth and the sky. Tens of thousands make a boundless sea. However, across the great river, hundreds of thousands of soldiers proceeded slowly, flanked by numerous laborers and servant armies. The front and rear lines were tens of miles apart, flanking the upper and lower reaches of the river. In the middle of the formations, the night order led personally by Ares seemed to be blessed by the whole army. Under the invisible mandate of war, this hastily assembled alliance army seemed like a battle-seasoned force, emanating a chilling aura. With a solemn face, the white-haired old woman had to admit that she had previously underestimated these armies of all countries. Or more precisely, she had underestimated Ares, the true commander of the armies. Perhaps the god of war himself was not an excellent deity, but this did not mean the godhood of war was not strong. Even if Zeus held this godhood, he would have played it to the fullest by now. This is not good. I didn't expect that with the god of war sitting in the middle of the army. His godhood would link the entire army together directly. Commanding them with ease is just secondary, the key is the qualitative improvement. With this, many large-scale destructive war weapons are useless. In a low voice, the white-haired old woman listened to another grand sorceress beside her. It was only when he observed firsthand that he realized. When the godhood of war was applied to a large-scale war, it had such a powerful effect. Strictly speaking, Ares' presence did not directly increase the overall strength of this million-strong alliance army. Perhaps he did, but that wasn't the key point. His true role was as a core of sublimation and unification, to put it simply, an upgrade. 100 ordinary soldiers. Their blood energy would be stronger than a first-rank war professional in quantity. But no matter how many ordinary soldiers stand together, their life energy's quality would not change in any way. Just like placing 10,000 bronze swords together still results in a bundle of bronze swords. A pile of bronze swords, a mountain of bronze, it wouldn't turn into even a single piece of iron. So, under these circumstances, the wizard's large-scale war weapons were like the church's instant death spell. That powerful divine art derived from the mandate of death could directly erase the existence of beings whose life essence was below a certain execution line, regardless of their quantity accumulation, and war weapons were the same. They might not do much damage to the strong, but to ordinary soldiers below a certain level of strength, they were as lethal as a reaper, killing a large swathe with one strike. Before the battle, the wizards had planned accordingly. But now, in front of them, the divine authority of war changed everything. If you consider an ordinary soldier as a bronze thin sword, and a first-rank soldier as a fine iron broadsword, the latter's material and quality are both superior to the former, representing the dual strength of quality and quantity. And the wizard's war weapons targeted the bronze material. It doesn't matter if you're a thin sword or a bronze shield. As long as you're bronze, you would die upon contact. However, the divine authority of war changed all of this. He didn't add materials to these weapons, but modified their material, uplifting their quality as the army's scale increased. When the army numbers in the thousands, bronze thin swords turn into coarse iron thin swords. When the army numbers in the tens of thousands, coarse iron thin swords turn into fine iron thin swords. When the army numbers in the millions, there are a million fine steel thin swords, greatly enhancing their quality. Watching everything in the distance, The white-haired old woman once again marveled at the power of divine authority. This is the power to change the rules. With such an upgrade coupled with military formation, Ares should have been invincible. How has he lost so many times? True. Indeed, with the divine authority of war being so powerful, how has he lost before? A flash of insight gleaming in her eyes, the white-haired old woman sneered. How did I almost forget? Don't blame the road for being bumpy if the person can't walk. Some people can play a good hand of cards into a mess. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe I have found the solution. Speaking softly, the white-haired old woman's gaze fell on Ares, seated in the center of the army. Yes, with the god of war being so strong, how did he lose before? That was naturally because instead of being a good god of war, he went charging in the front lines acting as a warrior, and ended up losing those battles. It was as absurd as a wizard not using witchcraft and instead dueling with a sword daily. However, since their opponent was this absurd, the white-haired old woman could only nod and hope that he did not regret it and kept on making the same mistake. Hundreds of miles away, in the middle of Ares' army. Unlike the loose formations surrounding them, the tens of thousands gathered around Ares are undoubtedly elite troops. Knights selected from the demigod aristocrats donned heavy armor, forming lines under the command of the war god Church, patrolling on both sides. Heavy armored warriors with giant shields took their positions at the front, guarding archers wielding longbows, trudging along the earth. Knights selected from the demigod aristocrats donned heavy armor, forming lines under the command of the war god Church, patrolling on both sides. Heavy armored warriors with giant shields took their positions at the front, guarding. Hundreds of miles away, in the middle of Ares' army. Unlike the loose formations surrounding them, the tens of thousands gathered around Ares are undoubtedly elite troops. Knights selected from the demigod aristocrats donned heavy armor, forming lines under the command of the war god Church, patrolling on both sides. Heavy armored warriors with giant shields took their positions at the front, guarding archers wielding longbows, trudging along the earth. From top to bottom, from human to horse, under the influence of war divine skill, tens of thousands moved as one. Under the divine authority of war, they were the ones receiving the most blessings, each exuding a sharp aura. Sitting on a bronze chariot pulled by 4 Pegasuses, Ares' gaze swept over the army he commanded. Not bad, he commented indifferently, then shifted his gaze away. He was certain that, under the suppression of current sovereign order, no kingdom's army could confront him head-on. This was his true power, the unmatched oppression on the battlefield. Though looking at this scene, Ares was not particularly pleased. After all, he loved war, but not this kind of war. In Ares' eyes, a true war should never be a bloodbath of a swarm of ants on the earth, winning with their courage and strength, and the wisdom and resilience of commanders. It was not honorable, nor was it great. If it was a contest of courage and strength, these lowly mortals were only fit to be a backdrop. Only the heroes and demigods chosen by all gods were qualified to shed their blood and demonstrate their abilities on the earth. And if it was a contest of wisdom and cunningness, that was even more of a desecration. Because only he, Ares, was the true god of war, not anyone else. Anyone who dared to mention the wisdom of war in his presence should be hanged in front of Athena's temple and exposed until they became mummified. As for the ordinary soldiers who had no presence in the eyes of the war god, their true value was to serve as a backdrop. Their deaths should highlight the strength of true warriors, just like the most luxurious gemstones are displayed on golden trays. That is their value of existence. But at this moment, Ares had to suppress his thoughts, because he knew that his enemies would likely not give him the opportunity to show the beauty of war. Despicable humans, just as cunning as Athena. His face not looking good, Ares closed his eyes, letting the bronze chariot proceed automatically. However, it didn't take long for the Pegasuses to suddenly neigh, as if signaling someone's arrival. Hiss! Snap! Quiet down! Frowning, Ares snapped his whip. The Pegasus Konobos, symbolizing the riot of war, was immediately struck, grinning in pain. Ignoring the thoughts of a horse, Ares coldly looked at the visitor who triggered Konobo's reaction. What is it? Your Highness. Kneeling on one knee, the middle-aged knight dared not look directly at his divine ancestor from 6 generations ago. Our foremost vanguard has approached the city of those ancient gods, evil god believers. As per your instructions, we had no intention of negotiating with them, but planned to start the battle directly. But before that, an evil witch appeared before us. She used her vile witchcraft to easily subdue the vanguard, but didn't continue slaughtering our soldiers. Instead, she sent them back to deliver a message to you. What did she say? His face not looking good. Unexpectedly, his vanguard was so easily subdued. But Ares did not get angry, because he had sent out a dozen vanguards. It's like this. After all, a few thousand troops sending out a vanguard, tens or hundreds of thousands should send out a dozen. It's very reasonable. So even if one squad was defeated, it was no big deal. In comparison, Ares was more concerned about what those wizards wanted to say to him. This, hesitating, the middle-aged knight didn't know if he should say it. But under Ares' piercing gaze, he reluctantly repeated the witch's demand. Your Highness, she said. She said she was a bit disappointed. Didn't expect even the war god to stoop to driving common laborers and forced workers. She originally wanted to witness your Highness' bravery, but didn't expect even the grand war god to fear wizards. Your Highness, I'm just relaying her words. Humph. I know. You think I would take out my anger on you? Snorting angrily, looking at the demigod in front of him, Ares suppressed his impulse. These wizards are truly ridiculous. This simple provocation, did they think he couldn't see through it? Gaze sweeping over the 4 Pegasuses. Burning, riot, flame, terror. These were the images of their names, also the desires deep in the war god's heart. He craved bloody combat, but that was meaningful combat like the one with Heracles. No, like those heroes with divine blood flowing through their veins. He wanted to fight them on the battlefield, showcasing his martial skills and blood courage, and eventually cutting them down. This was the battle he desired. As for those wizards, besides playing with those ridiculous tricks, what else could they do? What's the matter? Is there something more you haven't told me? Seeing the middle-aged knight hesitating, Ares asked curiously. This? Hesitating for a moment, the middle-aged knight took out a gift box from behind him. Your Highness, this is the gift that the witch gave you after expressing her disappointment. She said they're meticulously made golems, which could even fight titans in close combat. Probably wouldn't have the chance to test the war god's sharpness. Fortunately, she still had a gift that would be very suitable for you now, Your Highness. Because this was offered to you, I didn't dare to open it. It's just that, Your Highness, wizards are deceitful. There might be an evil curse in here. A curse? Heh. Do you know where we are? With a disdainful smile, seizing the gift box abruptly, Ares felt amused by the bloodline's ignorance. This is the center of the military formation, and I am the war god protected by 1,000,000 troops. Nothing can curse me. Everything is the same. SSSSSS. Ares tore off the wrapping paper roughly, genuinely curious about what the other party had given him. What does it mean, the most suitable for him now? Could it be a cloak worthy of a marshal? What is this? Looking at the strange fabric in front of him, Ares was momentarily confused. It's a nightingale's undergarment, Your Highness, and the most popular style in the country. The middle-aged knight's face turned ashen, not daring to answer at all. However, the knight beside Ares immediately recognized it. What's a nightingale? Still not comprehending, in Ares's memory, he had never seen anything like this. Yet just after asking this, Ares suddenly remembered something from the past. It seemed that his wife, Aphrodite, had mentioned this term to him before. At that time, she complained to him that in the mortal world, unmarried girls preferred to worship Athena and Artemis, lifelong unmarried women preferred to worship Hestia, and married ladies revered heavenly Empress Hera. As for herself, people who loved beauty believed in her more or less, but her most devoted followers were those promiscuous nightingales. Boom! A tremendous force instantly erupted. Ares's hair stood on end, and his eyes were bloodshot. He remembered now, he knew what nightingales were. The gift in his hand turned to ashes instantly, and everyone who witnessed him receiving the gift died with it. In this era, provoking the enemy with taunts and insults was common, but a gift like this was unseen in history. No matter the provocation, Ares couldn't care less. Although in some forgotten memory, there was a guy named Sema who faced such insults with indifference and even composed himself, the war god clearly didn't share this mentality. He only knew that if he could endure this, he would be a failure as a deity. Die! A divine light soared into the sky, striking toward the yet-to-engage armies. Just as he drew near, several prepared auras emerged from the other side. On a distant peak, witnessing this historic scene, Lane couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. This is truly surprising. He had just set up the alchemy mirror tube, yet already encountered such a scene. Lane could vouch that today's events had nothing to do with him. After all, he didn't expect that the old witch could come up with a way to enrage Ares, though this time Lane understood the war god's choice. After all, history had proven that such provocations were quite effective against an opposing army general. Shaking his head slightly, Lane turned to see Clotho's bewildered gaze. Clearly, the Fates did not understand the reason for such anger. Even though she could glimpse destiny, this was something unprecedented in Chaos's history. Never mind. Having no intention to explain, Lane chose to continue watching. He's coming. Gazing into the distance, sharp senses caught the burst of power from afar. The white-haired old woman smiled lightly, unsurprised by the success of the plan. What kind of person was the war god? His deeds in the mortal realm spoke for themselves. If it were Zeus, perhaps he could ignore such humiliation. But since it was Ares, it was almost certain he would abandon the army and charge alone. But although he is coming, we can't fight him head-on. Because a wizard's methods never involve direct confrontation, and although Ares's anger temporarily overrides his reason, he will soon tire of our combat style and return to his army. So we need to find him an opponent, like the Titan Golem. Nodding slowly, a sinister-faced grand sorceress approved. Indeed, with the status of a high-ranking legendary, dealing with a demigod-level enemy was not difficult for a wizard, thanks to their systematic advantages. But if one were to fight the god of war head-on, it'd be best to give up the idea. Fortunately, the power of wizards extends beyond themselves, with external forces being an essential part of their power. Golems, for instance, were the top inventions following the Typhon disaster. Just as the chief of the White Tower created the artificial Demon King, other grand sorceresses had their masterpieces too. Combining research on life boxes and souls with the exploration in alchemy on life, alchemy golems were thus born. Regrettably, the creation of these golems needed souls, and this success didn't see widespread application and was eventually banned by the Church's strict condemnation. Besides the initial ones created, only these few most powerful Titan golems remained. Slightly raising a hand, the sinister-faced grand sorceress made an empty gesture, sending an invisible wave. In the next moment, the ground beneath them trembled. A crack appeared promptly. From within the fissure, shadows emerged. Several titanic figures, 100 stories tall, composed entirely of flowing metal, stepped out slowly, like mountains rising from the earth. Titan golems, with bones of land demons and sea monsters, alchemically refined extraordinary metals, fragments of ancient stars fallen to earth, even containing divine blood from the time of the Titans' ancient battles. Unable to be mass-produced, I had to trade some lower realm soul crystals from the demons to create these. I heard one of their lords is planning to make a soul prism. I wonder if it has any special features. Regrettably speaking, the sinister-faced grand sorceress couldn't help but sigh secretly. If only his experiments hadn't been banned, perhaps he could create a whole new species? After all, gods created humans and he created golems. Having souls, even if acquired through plunder, was the same as the demons of hell. Who doubted they were a race? If he could form a golem empire, then pull his own soul out, creating the mightiest golem capable of continuous evolution, who said he couldn't be its ancestor or the golem god? What a shame, just a few souls, it's not like I aimed for their destruction. Even the great spirit realm lord shouldn't mind this little transgression. All right now, stop sighing and get to work. Ares is coming. Remember to lure him away from the army once the battle starts. Speaking lightly, the old white-haired witch reminded him. All right. Nodding slowly, the sinister-faced grand sorceress steadied his thoughts. The deity was indeed powerful, as was the dominion of war, but these gods barely knew how to use this divine gift. Once the connection between Ares and the million-strong army was severed, at most within a quarter of an hour, their colleagues in the city could slaughter most enemies before they even uttered a last word.